The study I'm about to do a critical appraisal on has the topic Association between Depression and Overweight in Chinese Adolescents, which is a cross-sectional study done by Shao et al. In 2019. The rationale for conducting this study was well-founded. The escalating prevalence of overweight and obesity among adolescents has emerged as a significant public health issue on a global scale, particularly in developing nations. For example, in China, there's been a noteworthy and sustained rise in the occurrence of obesity among adolescents with an estimated annual increase of 9%, and India had an estimated increase of 23.9%, according to this article. The identification of risk factors for adolescent obesity is crucial in the development of effective and efficient intervention strategies, given the higher likelihood of overweight or obese adolescents to remain so after maturing. So this study was of paramount importance because the association of obesity and depression in adolescents can even lead to adults, the same kids when they have grown up, to be more prone to be obese again. Previous studies have found an association between the two. For example, in an article by Goodman and Whitaker and an article by H. Ruby, these articles have also found a positive correlation between obesity and depression. So that means this article has also found its results correlating well with the other researchers. Then the definition of obesity. It is a pathological state that is typified by an abnormal accumulation of adipose tissue within the body, and it is measured by BMI, which is equals to weight in kilograms over height in meters. So the equation is weight over height squared. Then depression is a mental health disorder that impacts an individual's affective state, cognitive process, and overall state of being. Then obesity rates elevates during adolescence, and another example is the example in Australia, according to the Australian according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, in 20 between um, 2017 and 2018, 24.9% of adolescents were overweight or obese. So this is a very high amount and poses a high risk for public health intervention. The correlation, the role, not correlation, the role of depression in obesity. So the role of depression and obesity. So obesity develops and progresses because of depression in several ways. Overeating, for example, and a sedentary lifestyle are two behaviors that are more common in people with depression. As a reaction to emotional discomfort, depression can impair appetite regulation and cause irregular eating habits. It also saps motivation, making it difficult to exercise and keep up a healthy lifestyle. So all these things will lead to an individual gaining weight, and it might lead to obesity. The correlation between depression and obesity holds considerable significance in the realm of public health for various reasons. Both conditions exhibit a high prevalence on a global scale, affecting a significant number of individuals. So, understanding the role of depression in the development and persistence of obesity during this period is important due to the potential long-term health consequences. For example, obesity can lead to cardiovascular diseases, and it can also lead to some diseases like diabetes. The research design was appropriate. So the research utilized a prospective design, which is well suited for investigating the temporal association between depression and obesity. The investigators conducted a cross-sectional study on a group of teenagers, and the teenagers were between 10 to 12 years. In on a group of adolescents rather, which were between 10 to 12 years, and gathered information at various intervals. The study employed a strategy of measuring depression prior to evaluating obesity outcomes. This was done as a way to mitigate the potential for reverse causation. So what they did was to make sure that they had to measure depression first, so that we know that we are measuring the effect depression might have on obesity. However, bias, it is noteworthy that potential designs may still be susceptible to biases and confounding. So the potential for bias arises when there is a systematic difference between the participants who are lost to follow up and those who are retained in the study. So the provision of attrition rates and measures taken to mitigate potential bias resulting from attrition will be a valuable contribution from the authors. A cohort study type was used. The present investigation utilized data sourced from the China Family Panel Studies with the abbreviation of CFPS. So it's a comprehensive longitudinally designed social survey that was conducted by the Institute of Social Science Survey at Peking University. So they just collected the data and they used the data to do the calculations and to do the study. The data was collected among adolescents aged 10 to 12 years old, as mentioned before. Data were participants recruited in an acceptable way. The study extracted pertinent variables from three CFPS, which is China Family Panel Studies. So the three databases were child database, adult database, and family database. So in the child database, they took birth weight, they took age, gender, height, weight, ethnicity of the adolescents, and also birth weight, and also the duration of breastfeeding. Then in the adult database, they took data for maternal height, maternal weight, and maternal education. Then from the family database, they took household income level data. So this is how the data was collected. And secondly, in in-school questionnaire was given to the students so that they can fill questionnaires about the depression, and it was used on the CSD scale, which stands for Center for Epidemiology Studies Depression Scale. So the questionnaires was for that. Then ethical approval of the study was granted by the Biomedical Ethics Committee of Peking University. Parents and also administrators were also allowed to fill questionnaires as needed. So after that, another home interview was also done, which was a 90-minute home interview with an adolescent, so that they can actually record the data using the Center for Epidemiology Studies Depression Scale when a child is comfortable in his or her own parent's house or guardian's house. The exposure was accurately measured. So the exposure was depression. So we used the Center for Epidemiologic Studies Depression Scale. And as noted earlier, the CSD contains the CSD, which is the abbreviation, contains 20 items that are summed so that scores have a potential range from 0 to 60. So the higher scores indicate a greater frequency of depressive experiences. A score of 16 or higher is interpreted to indicate a risk for depression. The CSD total score provides an indication of depressive symptom severity that is based on a combination of the presence or absence of depressive experience and the presence and absence of well-being. So basically, in this CSDC, the higher the score, the higher the risk, or the higher the risk of having depression. And if the score is greater than 16, that indicated a higher risk or a greater chance of that person having depression. Um, However, this epidemiologic study's depression scale has limitations because it was a self-reporting too and self-awareness too. So the students were the ones who would report what they were feeling. And sometimes this creates a lot of bias because we don't know if the students were really telling us or were really giving us information of exactly how they felt. Since it was self-reporting, the study they had just to take whatever the students would have told them. And the other limitation is that the CSD is a screening tool and it does not provide any clinical diagnosis of depression, so it misses the full complexity and severity of depression symptoms. So in this, I can say the exposure was accurately measured to some extent, otherwise there were limitations. The outcome was accurately measured, which is obesity, using BMI, which is weight over height squared. The reliance on direct measurement rather than self-report enhanced the accuracy of the outcome assessment because these data was collected from the database. It was not self-reported, so accuracy increased. BMI was computed using height and weight, as mentioned. Um, and adolescents were classified as obese if their body mass index was equal to if it was equal or if it exceeded the 95th percentile for their age. Then when it was between 85th percentile and 95th percentile, then they were classified as overweight. Um, Regression analysis was used, which was run on a statistical tool called SPSS, and it was used to calculate. And this regression analysis made the results to be more accurate and to interpret it better. The findings of the study indicated that among the 1,081 adolescents aged 10 to 12 years, a significant proportion of nearly one-fourth were observed to be experiencing symptoms of depression. The study also found that within the particular group being examined, the rates of overweight and obesity were 13.15% and 11.95%, which is a greater percentage. The study also found a significant association between maternal education level and depression symptoms. But however, other core factors such as breastfeeding, birth weight, maternal BMI was found to be irrelevant according to this study. It was only maternal education that correlated well with depression. Some confounders were there, which included physical activity, um, activity levels, the dietary patterns, some socioeconomic statuses, and genetics, which might have also contributed to the differences in the outcomes of the studies. Um, so these factors, the confounders, have the potential to introduce confounding variables into the relationship. The results can be applied to the population very well. The cohort of adolescents constituted of the study sample, hence it is advisable to exercise caution while extrapolating the results to wider populace. To evaluate the generalizability of the findings, it is imperative to consider the pertinent factors such as demographics, geographic location, and other characteristics of the study sample. So the other things to note in future will be geographic location and even demographics. And also, some studies by Marmorstein and by Shah also were also in positive correlation or in support with our studies that say boys experience obesity more than females. And a longitudinal approach might have been used in future rather than a cross-sectional, so that we'll be able to do a follow-up years later. But on this one, we couldn't do that because it was a cross-sectional. And another thing, um, the variation in determinants as mentioned, which are also co-founders, can also be put in place, let's say, for future studies. There were no any potential conflict of interest, which were mentioned in the paper. However, considering bias is of paramount importance, as mentioned earlier. Bias can also lead to conflict of interest, but on this paper, none were mentioned. Thank you.